When the bank called me to confirm the approval of a $200,000 loan I never applied for, I felt the floor disappear from under my feet. My son had forged my signature, destroyed my credit, and used my name to finance a luxury Mercedes intended to impress his father-in-law. What he didn't know is that banks have handwriting experts, and I have a memory that forgets no betrayal. My name is Bernard Cole. I am 65 years old, and my entire life I built my reputation on two unbreakable pillars: honesty and hard work. I spent 42 years working as a civil engineer at a construction firm in Miami, getting up every morning before dawn, sacrificing weekends and vacations to ensure my family never lacked anything. My wife Rose and I raised our only son, Adrian, with the values our own parents instilled in us: respect, responsibility, and integrity above all else. Adrian was always a smart kid, maybe too smart. He studied business administration at the University of Miami and got a decent job at a logistics company in Los Angeles. 2 years ago, he met Nicole Hayes, a 29-year-old woman who works as a graphic designer. From the beginning, I noticed something strange about that relationship, but I kept quiet. As a father, you learn there are battles not worth fighting, and I thought my son was mature enough to make his own decisions. Nicole's family, especially her father, Stephen Hayes, always seemed pretentious to me. Stephen owns a chain of hardware stores in California and never misses an opportunity to remind everyone how successful he is. In the few family gatherings I attended, his condescending comments about my profession and my modest lifestyle were more than evident. Rose asked me to be patient, insisting it was important to maintain harmony for Adrian's sake. It was a Tuesday morning in April when my life took a turn I never imagined possible. I was having my morning coffee on our terrace, enjoying the morning silence, when my cell phone rang. The number on the screen looked familiar. It was my bank, Chase Bank, from the Biscayne Boulevard branch, where I have been a customer for over 30 years. "Mr. Cole?" a female voice asked on the other end of the line. "Yes, this is he," I replied, not imagining what was to come. "We are calling from the loan department to confirm that your personal credit application for $200,000 has been approved. The funds were transferred to your checking account exactly 5 months ago as requested. However, we detected that the last 2 monthly payments have not been made, and this is affecting your credit history." The world stopped for a moment. I set my coffee cup on the table with trembling hands. "Excuse me, there must be a mistake," I said, trying to stay calm. "I never applied for any loan." There was an awkward pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Cole, we have all the documentation signed by you. The application was processed at our main branch on November 15th of last year. Are you telling me you did not make this transaction?" My heart began to pound. November, 5 months ago. I tried to remember what I was doing on that date, but my mind was a whirlwind of confusion and growing panic. "I assure you, I never signed any document for a loan of that amount," I insisted, feeling anxiety take over me. "I need to go to the bank immediately to clarify this." "Of course, Mr. Cole. We'll expect you whenever you're ready. Ask for Mrs. Reynolds in the loan department. She can show you all the documentation." I hung up the phone, feeling like I was living a nightmare. Rose came out to the terrace, hearing my agitated tone. "What's wrong, Bernie? You're pale." I briefly explained the situation. Her face reflected the same disbelief I felt. "It has to be a system error," she said, trying to reassure me. "Banks make mistakes all the time. Go there and clear it up." But something deep inside me told me this was not a simple administrative error. A dark, heavy feeling settled in my chest, an intuition I couldn't ignore. At 10 in the morning, I was standing in front of the doors of Chase Bank. Every step into the building felt heavy, as if I were walking toward an inevitable fate that I didn't fully understand yet. Mrs. Reynolds received me in a small office on the second floor. She was a woman in her 50s with a professional appearance and a serious look. On her desk rested a thick blue folder with my name printed on the label. "Mr. Cole, thank you for coming so quickly," she said, pointing to the chair in front of her desk. "I understand you're surprised by our call. Let me show you the documentation we have in our files." She opened the folder and pulled out several documents. My stomach tightened when I saw my name heading each page. There were application forms, income statements, scanned identification documents, and most disturbingly of all, contracts signed with my signature. "As you can see," Mrs. Reynolds continued, "the application was approved last November 15th for the amount of $200,000. The stated purpose was urgent home renovation and financial support for his son's wedding. The funds were fully transferred to your checking account on November 25th, and since then, a monthly payment plan of $3,200 for 7 years was established." I took the documents with trembling hands. The handwriting looked like mine. The signature had my characteristic shape, but something was wrong, very wrong. I carefully observed each stroke, each curve of the signature. As an engineer, I've always had good attention to detail, and now that skill was showing me small inconsistencies. "Mrs. Reynolds, I did not sign these documents," I said with a firm voice. "Look here at the C in Cole. I always make a more pronounced stroke at the top, and here in the B for Bernard, the curve is different. This is not my signature." She leaned over the desk to examine more closely what I was pointing at. Her expression changed from professional to concerned. "If what you're saying is true, Mr. Cole, we are looking at a serious case of document forgery. Do you have any idea who could have done this?" My mind was racing. Who had access to my documents? Who knew my signature well enough to try to copy it? Who needed $200,000 desperately? "I need to know exactly what happened to that money," I demanded. "Where were the funds transferred?" Mrs. Reynolds typed quickly on her computer. "The $200,000 was transferred to your main checking account, the one ending in 3721. From there, several transactions were made during the following days. A wire transfer of $185,000 to a luxury car dealership in Los Angeles called Premium Motors of Beverly Hills. Another transfer of $12,000 to an event planning company called Unique Celebrations, and a cash withdrawal of $3,000 at our downtown Los Angeles branch ATM. My blood ran cold. Los Angeles. Adrian lived in Los Angeles. The luxury dealership, the event company for the wedding. Everything was starting to make horrible, devastating sense. "Mrs. Reynolds, I am formally requesting a full investigation of this case," I said in a controlled voice, although inside I was falling apart. "I want a forensic handwriting analysis of these signatures. I want to know all the movements of that account, and I want to know exactly who was physically in this branch the day I supposedly signed these documents." She nodded gravely. "Of course, Mr. Cole. I am going to initiate the internal investigation protocol immediately. However, I must inform you that until this situation is resolved, the unpaid installments continue to generate late interest and affect your credit rating. We haven't received the corresponding payments for 2 months. 2 months, I repeated, feeling anger begin to mix with confusion. And you're only contacting me now? The system sends automatic reminders first to your registered email. Upon receiving no response, we escalate to a phone call. I'm sorry it took this long. Then I remembered something. A few months ago, Adrian had asked me to update my email address with the bank because the old one was having problems. He had helped me create a new one. Had he deliberately changed my contact information to intercept the bank's notifications? I need copies of all this documentation, I requested, and I want the name of the employee who processed this loan. Mrs. Reynolds took notes quickly. The executive who approved the operation was Mr. David Miller. He works in this same branch. Would you like to speak with him? Yes, right now. 10 minutes later, David Miller, a young man about 35 with an impeccable suit, entered the office. He seemed nervous when Mrs. Reynolds explained the situation. Mr. Cole, I remember that operation perfectly, he said, with an unsteady voice. A gentleman came in, with all the documentation in order, presented his ID, proof of income, everything was correct. He signed the papers in front of me. I had no reason to suspect. What did this person look like physically? I asked, feeling I already knew the answer. Well, he was an older man, about 60 or so, grey hair, glasses. It wasn't me. Someone had pretended to be me, someone who knew my data, who had copies of my documents, who had studied my signature enough to forge it convincingly. And it didn't seem strange to you that a 60-year-old man would request a $200,000 loan with a 7-year term? I questioned harshly. David Miller swallowed. The gentleman, he presented medical certificates attesting to excellent health. Everything was in order, according to our protocols. I left the bank 2 hours later with copies of all the documentation under my arm and a painful certainty growing in my chest. I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to start looking. I arrived home with my mind clouded by thoughts I didn't want to accept as real. Rose was in the kitchen preparing lunch when I entered. Seeing my expression, she immediately stopped what she was doing. What happened at the bank? She asked with obvious concern. I sat on the living room sofa and showed her the documents. As she reviewed them, I watched her face go from bewilderment to absolute horror. Bernie, this makes no sense. Who would do something like this? I need to ask you something very important, Rose, I said with a calm but firm voice. Do you remember if Adrian was at our house last November? If he asked for anything, documents, papers, anything? Rose fell silent for long seconds. I saw her memory working, searching through everyday recollections. Yes, now that you mention it, she said slowly. It was early November. He came for a weekend, saying he needed your documentation to request quotes from vendors for his wedding. He said some venues asked for the data of the bride's and groom's fathers to give special discounts or something. I felt my skin crawl. And what documents did you give him? He knew where you keep everything in your study. He went in there while I was making dinner. He was in there for about half an hour. When he came out, he was carrying a folder. He told me it was copies of your driver's license and some pay stubs he needed. I mentioned it to you that night when you got home from work, but you were tired and said it was no problem if it was for the wedding. A blurry memory came back to me. Indeed, Rose had mentioned something about Adrian and documents, but I was exhausted after a particularly difficult day supervising a complicated construction site. I had said something like, "It's fine, whatever he needs for his wedding," without paying real attention to the matter. Rose, he never returned those copies to me, I said, feeling the painful truth solidify. And now they appear on a fraudulent $200,000 loan. My wife brought her hands to her mouth. No, Bernie, Adrian wouldn't do something like that. There has to be another explanation. Maybe someone stole those documents from him. Maybe the money was used to buy a luxury car in Los Angeles. I interrupted her. $185,000 went to a dealership. Another $12,000 to an event company. Doesn't that seem like too much of a coincidence? Rose began to cry, silently. Seeing her pain broke my heart. But I couldn't stop now. I needed to get to the bottom of this. Do you remember anything else from that day? I insisted gently. Any detail could be important. She wiped her tears and took a deep breath. He was nervous, she said finally. Very nervous. I remember his hands were shaking when he drank the coffee I made him. I asked him if everything was okay with the wedding preparations, and he said yes, he was just stressed about the costs and the demands of Nicole's family. Those words echoed in my head. The demands of Nicole's family, specifically the demands of Stephen Hayes. Did Adrian ever mention anything specific about Stephen to you, I asked, about strange requests or pressures? Rose hesitated before answering. A few months ago, I think in October, Adrian came to visit and seemed depressed. I asked him what was wrong, and he said something about Stephen making a disparaging comment about our family, about how we weren't up to the Hayes standard. He said he felt humiliated every time there were family gatherings with them. My jaw tensed. Stephen Hayes and his arrogance, always making it clear he considered himself superior to us for having more money. To what extent had he pressured my son? What kind of demands had he imposed on him? I need to make some calls, I said, standing up. Don't say anything to Adrian yet. Not a word, do you understand me? Rose nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I went up to my study and closed the door. The first thing I did was check the file cabinet where I keep all my important documents. Sure enough, the notarized copies of my driver's license that I always kept there were missing. 3 months of old pay stubs and a copy of our house deed were also gone. I turned on my computer and opened my personal email. I searched for messages from November and December of the previous year. Nothing from the bank. Absolutely nothing. Then I remembered that Adrian had helped me create a new email because supposedly the old one had security problems. He had insisted strongly that I update all my banking information with the new email. I opened that email account, the one I rarely use. The inbox was full of notifications from the bank, payment reminders, notices of past due installments, warnings about the deterioration of my credit history. All the messages sent over the last 5 months that I had never seen because I never checked that account. Adrian had orchestrated everything meticulously. He had isolated me from the information. He had forged my signature. He had used an imposter to show up at the bank, and he had diverted $200,000 for his own purposes. My own son had betrayed me in the most calculated and cruel way possible. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I had saved for years. Vince Ramirez, an old friend who worked as a private detective in Los Angeles. I needed information. Concrete proof before confronting anyone. Vince, it's Bernie Cole, I said, when he answered. I need your help urgently. It's about my son. Vince Ramirez had been a classmate of mine in college, though he left engineering to go into private investigation. We kept in sporadic contact over the years, and I knew he was someone I could trust completely. Bernie, my friend. Long time no hear, he replied, with his characteristic deep voice. What kind of help do you need? I explained the situation with all the details. The fraudulent loan, the suspicious transfers, the dates, the amounts. Vince listened in silence, taking mental notes like the professional he was. I get it. Give me 48 hours, he said finally. I'm going to investigate that dealership, Premium Motors of Beverly Hills. If they bought a vehicle of that value, there will be records, invoices, documentation. I'm also going to check your son's and his inner circle's social media. People are incredibly careless about what they post online. Thanks, Vince. I'll pay you whatever it takes. Cut the nonsense. We're friends. I just want to help you find the truth. I hung up the phone feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. The next 2 days were torture. I maintained my normal routine so as not to arouse suspicion. But every minute felt like an eternity. Rose was devastated, alternating between denial and silent crying. I stayed cold, focused, because I knew I needed all my mental faculties intact for what was to come. Adrian called on Wednesday night, as he usually did weekly. We talked about trivial things, the weather, his work, the final preparations for the wedding scheduled for June. His voice sounded normal, relaxed, without any trace of guilt or nervousness. That calmness was even more disturbing to me. How could he sleep at night, knowing what he had done? On Friday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Vince. "Bernie, I have information," he said without preamble, "and you're not going to like it. Tell me everything." On November 26th of last year, one day after the funds were released into your account, a purchase of a Mercedes-Benz E-Class was made at Premium Motors of Beverly Hills. 2023 model, metallic black, with all the luxury extras. Final price, $185,000, paid in full via wire transfer. My breathing quickened. Whose name is the vehicle registered to? Here's the interesting part. The registered owner is Stephen Hayes, your future daughter-in-law's father. I felt as if I had been punched in the stomach. Stephen Hayes, the arrogant hardware store owner who had always looked down on me. The man who considered his family superior to ours. Are you sure? Completely. I have a copy of the bill of sale. But there's more. I checked social media. Like I said, Stephen Hayes' Instagram profile is public, and 4 months ago he posted several photos showing off his new toy, a gleaming black Mercedes. In one of the posts, he wrote, "When your son-in-law knows how to value his in-laws, thanks, Adrian, for this incredible gift." The rage I felt at that moment was so intense I had to sit down. Everything fit together with appalling clarity. Adrian hadn't stolen that money out of personal greed or desperate need. He had done it to buy a luxury car for Stephen Hayes, to win his approval, to stop being the poor son-in-law who wasn't up to the Hayes family's standards. "Vince, I need you to send me all the evidence you have," I said in a controlled voice. "Screenshots, documents, everything. Already sending them to your email. But Bernie, there's something else you should know. That Mercedes isn't the only big expense they've had. I dug a little deeper and found that the event company, Unique Celebrations, organized an engagement party at an exclusive venue in Los Angeles in December. Approximate cost? Between $10,000 and $12,000. Photos of the event are on Nicole's profile. It was a lavish celebration with over 100 guests. $12,000. The second transfer I had seen in the bank records. Adrian had used my stolen money not only to buy his father-in-law a car, but also to finance an engagement party I probably wasn't even invited to. "And the $3,000 withdrawn in cash?" I asked. "Can't track that for sure, but my bet is it was for various wedding expenses or for some other gift to the Hayes family. Those kinds of families always find ways to extract more money." I hung up the phone and opened my email. Vince had been exhaustive. There it was, all the proof. Photos of the Mercedes with Stephen posing proudly next to it. Screenshots of his posts bragging about the gift from his son-in-law. The bill of sale from the dealership, which clearly listed Stephen's name as the buyer and the origin of the money via transfer from an account matching mine. Photographs from the ostentatious engagement party with decorations that must have cost a fortune. I printed every document, every photograph. I organized them meticulously in a new folder. This was my evidence, my ammunition for what was to come. Rose entered the study and saw my expression. "What did you find out?" she asked with a trembling voice. I showed her everything. The photos of Stephen with the Mercedes, the post where he thanked Adrian for the gift, the dealership records. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing. "How could he do this to us?" she repeated between tears. "How could he betray his own father like that?" I had no answer to that question. I only knew that my son had crossed a line there was no coming back from. He had sold his integrity, my trust, and his future for the approval of a man whose opinion should never have mattered. Now I needed to decide my next steps, and this time there would be no room for compassion or second chances. On Monday morning, I requested an appointment with Monica Duran, a lawyer specializing in criminal law and family fraud cases whom Vince had recommended. Her law firm was located in downtown Miami, in a modern building on Brickell Avenue. I arrived punctually at 9 a.m. with my folder of evidence under my arm. Monica turned out to be a woman of about 42, with a penetrating gaze and a professional demeanor that inspired immediate confidence. She received me in her office, a tidy space with shelves full of legal codes and files. "Mr. Cole, your friend Vince gave me some details of your case over the phone," she said as we settled in. "But I need you to tell me everything from the beginning without omitting any detail." For the next hour, I recounted every event. The call from the bank, the discovery of the forged documents, Vince's investigation, the transfers, the Mercedes registered in Stephen's name, the engagement party. I showed her every piece of proof, every photograph, every document I had collected. Monica examined everything with meticulous attention, taking notes on her tablet. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers under her chin. "Mr. Cole, what we have here is a clear case of forgery of a public document, identity theft, aggravated fraud, and embezzlement," she explained in a grave tone. "These are serious crimes that can carry prison sentences of 2 to 6 years, according to the state penal code. Furthermore, the fact that your son used his family bond to commit the fraud constitutes an aggravating factor." "What are my options?" I asked, feeling the weight of every word. "You have 2 paths. The first is the civil route. Sue your son for the damages caused, seek financial compensation, and have him take over the debt. The second is the criminal route. File a formal complaint with the police and let justice take its course, which would involve a judicial process and a possible jail sentence." I thought of Rose, of her pain, of how this would definitively destroy our family. But I also thought of the betrayal, of the calculating coldness with which Adrian had executed everything, of how he had looked me in the eye for months, lying deliberately. "I want to pursue the criminal route," I said firmly, "but first I need to be completely sure the evidence is irrefutable." Monica nodded in approval. "Then the first thing we'll do is request an official forensic handwriting analysis from the bank. We need a technical report from a court-recognized handwriting expert, certifying that those signatures are forgeries. We will also ask the bank for the security recordings from the day you supposedly signed those documents. If there are cameras, and there are in all branches, we can prove it wasn't you who was there. How long will all this take? The handwriting analysis could be ready in 2 or 3 weeks. The security recordings, if they still have them, we should get in less time with a court order. I am going to draft a letter to the bank immediately requesting the preservation of all evidence and appointing an expert witness. Monica began working on her computer while I looked out the office window. The city bustled below, people coming and going with their normal lives, oblivious to the drama unfolding in my existence. "Mr. Cole," Monica continued, without stopping her typing, "I also need you to authorize me to request a complete breakdown of all transactions made from that account, from November until now. I want to see every dollar that went out and where it went. Vince did excellent preliminary work, but we need official bank documentation. You have my full authorization for whatever is necessary." 2 weeks later, I received a call from Monica. Her voice sounded satisfied. "Mr. Cole, we have the results of the handwriting analysis. The expert appointed by the bank, Javier Solis, one of the most recognized forensic handwriting experts in the country, has identified 14 significant points of divergence between your authentic signature and the signatures that appear on the loan documents. His report is categorical. The signatures are forgeries made by someone who tried to imitate your handwriting, but without success." I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief, because I finally had irrefutable technical proof. Sadness, because this confirmation meant there was no turning back. "And the security footage?" I asked. "Here's something interesting. The bank keeps recordings for 6 months. We obtained the images from November 15th, the day you supposedly signed the documents. The cameras show an older man, indeed with a similar appearance to yours, but with notable differences. This individual wore thick-framed glasses, something you don't wear. His way of walking was different. And when the facial recognition expert compared the biometric measurements of the man's face in the video with your recent photographs, he found inconsistencies in the distance between the eyes, the width of the jaw, and the shape of the ears. Who was that man then? We don't know yet. Probably someone your son hired to pose as you. A professional imposter. But that's a problem for the police investigation once we file the complaint. The important thing is we have visual proof it wasn't you." Monica emailed me all the documents, the 14-page expert report detailing every divergence in the signatures, screenshots from the security recordings, the comparative facial analysis, and the complete breakdown of the bank transactions that confirmed exactly what Vince had discovered. $185,000 to Premium Motors of Beverly Hills for the Mercedes, $12,000 to Unique Celebrations for the engagement party, and $3,000 in cash withdrawn from the ATM. The bank, after receiving the expert report, has frozen all accounts associated with your son's Social Security number as a preventive measure, Monica informed me. They have also temporarily suspended the collection of your loan payments while the criminal investigation is resolved. Your credit history will be cleared once we obtain the court judgment confirming the fraud. What's the next step? Now comes the hard part, Mr. Cole. I need you to prepare a formal statement detailing all the facts. Then we will file the criminal complaint at the police station. From that moment on, the judicial machinery will be set in motion, and there will be no turning back. Your son will be summoned, interrogated, and will face serious criminal charges. Are you absolutely sure you want to continue? I thought of my 5-year-old son smiling as I taught him to ride a bike. I thought of the proud college graduate on his graduation day. I thought of all the family meals, the shared laughter, the moments I believed were genuine. Then I thought of his coldness in looking me in the eye for months, knowing what he had done. I thought of the $200,000 stolen. I thought of the Mercedes that Stephen was proudly driving around Los Angeles. I thought of my destroyed credit and the nights Rose spent crying. Yes, I replied, with a firm voice. I am completely sure. Prepare the complaint. The formal filing of the complaint took place on a Tuesday morning at the Central Police Station in Miami. Monica accompanied me throughout the process. The detective in charge, an experienced man named Gabriel Monroe, meticulously reviewed all the documentation we brought. Javier Solis's expert report with the 14 points of divergence in the signatures, the screenshots from the security footage showing the imposter, the comparative facial analysis, the complete bank records, the photographs of the Mercedes with Stephen Hayes, and the social media posts where he bragged about the gift from my son. This is one of the most meticulously documented cases of family fraud I've ever seen, Detective Monroe commented as he organized the papers. Mr. Cole, with this amount of solid evidence, the DA will have no problem prosecuting this case. I am going to initiate the formal investigation immediately. I signed the complaint with a steady hand. Every stroke of my authentic signature contrasted painfully with the clumsy imitations Adrian had used to rob me. The detective handed me a copy of the official document. How long will the process take? I asked. The summons for your son will be sent within the next 72 hours. He will have to appear to give a statement. In the meantime, we will request court orders to investigate his bank accounts, his financial movements, and any other evidence we can gather. The judge will also order precautionary measures, probably a preventive freeze on his assets. I left the police station feeling a strange mixture of justice and emptiness. I had taken the definitive step. There was no turning back. 3 days later, on Thursday afternoon, my phone exploded with calls. Adrian called me 7 times in a row. I didn't answer any of them. Then came the text messages, each one more desperate than the last. Dad, I need to talk to you urgently. The bank froze all my accounts. Please answer. I don't understand what's happening. I got a court summons. It says you filed a complaint against me. This has to be a mistake. I ignored every message. Monica had advised me not to have any direct contact with him until after his formal statement to the detective. Any conversation could be used against him or complicate the legal process. But Adrian didn't give up. On Friday night, he showed up at our front door. Rose was at her sister's house, unable to bear the tension. I was alone when I heard the insistent ringing. I opened the door and saw him standing there. He looked terrible. Deep dark circles under his eyes, several days' worth of unshaven beard, wrinkled clothes. His hands were visibly shaking. Dad, please, I need you to explain what's happening, he said in a broken voice. Why did you file a complaint against me? Why did the bank freeze everything? I'll lose my apartment if I don't pay the mortgage. Nicole is furious. Her family is threatening to cancel the wedding. I stared at him without saying a word for long seconds. I wanted him to feel the same discomfort, the same crushing weight I had felt for weeks. Are you really going to pretend you don't know what this is about? I finally said in a glacial voice. You're going to look me in the eye and act like you're innocent? I don't know what you're talking about, he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. If there's some problem with the bank, we can solve it together. I'm your son, Dad. I went inside the house and returned with the folder containing all the evidence. I opened it in front of him and began to show him document after document. This is the $200,000 loan you applied for using my name and my forged signature, I said, pointing to the papers. This is the expert report that proves the signatures are fake, with 14 points of divergence identified by one of the most recognized handwriting experts in the country. This is the screenshot from the bank's security cameras showing the imposter you hired to pose as me. Adrian's face lost all its color, his lips trembled. And this, I continued, pulling out the photographs of the Mercedes, is the Wahikiyoshi $185,000 Mercedes-Benz you bought with my stolen money to give to Stephen Hayes. Here he is, posing proudly next to the car, publicly thanking his generous son-in-law on Instagram. Adrian slumped against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the porch floor. He covered his face with his hands. "Dad, I can explain," he muttered between sobs. "It wasn't like you think." "Oh no?" I retorted coldly. "Then explain it to me. Explain how you stole my documents under the pretext of the wedding. Explain how you forged my signature. Explain how you hired someone to pose as me at the bank. Explain how you used $200,000 from a loan that I will have to pay back to buy a luxury car for your father-in-law. Go ahead, Adrian. Enlighten me." He looked up, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Stephen demanded it," he finally said in a broken voice. "He told me if I wanted to marry Nicole, I had to prove I was worthy of their family, that the Coles were poor and mediocre, and I needed to do something big to prove my worth. He said he expected a significant gift, something that showed my real commitment to his daughter. And you thought the solution was to rob me, to destroy my credit, my reputation, my trust? I was going to pay you back," he shouted desperately. "I had a plan. I was going to get a promotion at work. I was going to pay the loan installments myself. You never would have found out. I thought in a few years, when it was all paid off, I would just confess and we'd laugh about it." The naivety of his plan, the monumental stupidity of his reasoning, left me speechless for a moment. "Do you realize how absurd that sounds?" I said in disbelief. "You thought you could pay $3,200 a month for 7 years without anyone noticing? What about the 2 payments you already missed? Where was your wonderful plan then?" Adrian had no answer. He just sat there, crying like a child caught in a lie. "You have 48 hours to present yourself to Detective Monroe and give your statement," I said in a final tone. "I suggest you get a good lawyer. And Adrian, don't ever set foot in this house again. You are no longer welcome here." I closed the door in his face as he continued to sob on the porch. I heard his muffled pleas for several minutes before he finally left. I couldn't sleep that night. Adrian's words echoed in my head. Stephen Hayes had manipulated him, had exploited his insecurities, had pushed him to commit a crime. But that didn't excuse the decisions my son had made. He had chosen to betray me instead of talking to me. He had chosen the path of fraud instead of honesty. And now we would both pay the price for those choices. On Sunday morning, as I was having coffee on the terrace, trying to find some peace of mind, I heard the sound of a car stopping in front of the house. I looked out and saw a BMW 5 Series parking. 3 people got out: Adrian, Nicole, and Stephen Hayes. I took a deep breath. I knew this moment would come. Monica had warned me they would likely try a direct confrontation or seek some kind of negotiation before the legal process advanced further. She had given me clear instructions: stay calm, don't let myself be provoked, and record the entire conversation, if possible. I took out my cell phone and activated the audio recording app before opening the door. Stephen Hayes was the first to speak. He was wearing an expensive suit and sunglasses, even though the day was cloudy. His attitude was one of barely contained arrogance. "Mr. Cole, we need to talk about this ridiculous misunderstanding," he said, without even greeting me. "I think you're taking things too far for a simple family matter that could be resolved in a civilized manner." "A simple family matter," I repeated in a neutral tone. "Is that what you call the theft of $200,000 through document forgery?" Nicole stepped forward. She was wearing an elegant dress, and her makeup was flawless, but her eyes showed nervousness. "Mr. Cole, please understand the situation," she said in a soft, almost pleading voice. "Adrian made a mistake out of love for our family. My father just wanted to make sure Adrian was truly committed to our marriage. It's a tradition in our family for the groom to demonstrate his ability to provide. And that demonstration includes committing fraud and stealing from his own father?" I asked, looking her straight in the eye. Stephen intervened again, this time with a harsher tone. "Look, Cole, let's be practical. Adrian is young and did something stupid, but this could ruin his life completely. We are willing to reach an agreement. We'll give you the Mercedes back. You withdraw the complaint, and we all move on as if nothing happened." "Give me the Mercedes back," I repeated with a bitter laugh. "The car that's registered in your name, Mr. Hayes. The car you've been using for 4 months. The car you publicly thanked my son for on your social media." Stephen's mask of calm began to crack. "That car was a legitimate gift from my son-in-law," he said through gritted teeth. "I had no knowledge of how he obtained the money." "Really?" "Because I have screenshots right here," I said, pulling out my phone and opening the files Vince had sent. "Here, in your post from November 28th, just 2 days after the money was stolen from my account, you wrote, 'When your son-in-law knows how to value his in-laws. Thanks, Adrian, for this incredible gift.' A man buys a $185,000 Mercedes just 2 days after a fraudulent loan, and you expect me to believe you suspected nothing strange?" Stephen's face turned red with fury. "Are you calling me an accomplice? Be careful with your accusations, Cole. I have the best lawyers in California." "I'm not accusing you of anything I can't prove," I replied calmly. "I have records of conversations between you and Adrian where you discuss the need to make this gift. I have testimonies from people who heard your demands. And I have your own public confession on social media, admitting the car was specifically to win your approval." Adrian, who had remained silent until that moment, exploded. "Dad, please," he shouted desperately. "You're about to destroy my entire life over this. I'll lose my job if this continues. Nicole will leave me. I'll have a criminal record. Is that what you want? To destroy your own son?" "I didn't destroy anything, Adrian," I replied with a firm voice. "You made every single decision that brought you here. You forged my signature. You hired an imposter. You stole $200,000. You chose to impress this family," I pointed to the Hazeys, "over your integrity and your own father's trust." Nicole started to cry. "Mr. Cole, we are willing to compensate you financially," she said between sobs. "My family has resources. We can pay you double what Adrian took. An extra $100,000 for your silence and for dropping the charges. Think about it. It would be an excellent deal for you." Her words outraged me more than anything else said so far. "Are you offering me money to let my son go unpunished after committing a serious crime? Do you think my silence can be bought? Is that how things work in your family, Miss Hayes?" Stephen tried to change tactics, adopting a falsely conciliatory tone. "Cole, let's be reasonable. You're an older man. close to retirement. $300,000 is a lot of money. You could live comfortably in your final years. All we ask is that you sign a private agreement, withdraw the complaint, and let's not let the justice system ruin the life of a young man with a bright future. The answer is no, I said, with absolute firmness. There is no amount of money that can buy my complicity in this. Adrian committed fraud, forgery, and theft. You, Mr. Hayes, pressured my son to do it through manipulation and absurd demands. And all of you are now trying to bribe me to cover up serious crimes. I took out my phone again and stopped the audio recording. Then I showed them the screen. Everything you have said in the last 15 minutes has been recorded. Your bribery offers, your implicit admissions, everything. This recording will be handed over to my lawyer and the detective in charge of the case. Mr. Hayes, I suggest you get those excellent lawyers you mentioned, because you're going to need them. Stephen's face turned visibly pale. Nicole let out a stifled cry. Adrian just slumped against the hood of the BMW, defeated. Now get off my property, I ordered, pointing to the street. The next time you want to talk to me, let it be through your legal representatives. Stephen shot me a look full of hatred, but said nothing more. He took Nicole by the arm and led her back to the car. Adrian followed, walking like an automaton. Before getting into the vehicle, Stephen turned and shouted, "You're going to regret this, Cole. No one threatens me and gets away with it." "That wasn't a threat, Mr. Hayes," I replied calmly. "It was a promise that justice will take its course. There's an important difference." The BMW sped off violently, leaving tire marks on the asphalt. I went into the house and immediately sent the complete recording to Monica via email with a note explaining the context. She replied in less than 5 minutes. "Perfect. This confirms the pressure exerted by Hayes and his knowledge of the fraudulent origin of the money. I am going to include it in the file and request that he also be investigated as a possible instigator of the crime." I sat on the living room sofa, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. The legal battle was just beginning, but now I had an absolute certainty. I had made the right decision. There would be no turning back, no forgiveness, no backroom deals. Justice would run its course, regardless of the consequences. 2 days after the confrontation at my house, Monica summoned me to her office to inform me about the case's progress. When I arrived, I found her surrounded by new documents and with a satisfied expression. "Mr. Cole, I have important news," she announced as she pointed me to the chair. "The recording you sent me has been invaluable. The prosecutor assigned to the case, Mr. Rodrigo Batista, personally reviewed the audio and believes there are sufficient grounds to expand the investigation to include Stephen Hayes as a possible instigator and receiver of stolen property." What does that mean exactly? It means that Stephen Hayes not only received goods produced by a crime, the Mercedes, but there is also evidence that he actively pressured his son-in-law to get that gift, knowing or having reason to know the illicit origin of the money. In the recording, he indirectly admits to setting that demand as a condition for approving the marriage. Monica opened a new folder on her desk. "Furthermore, we formally filed the criminal complaint this morning with the Superior Court. The presiding judge, Judge Margaret Campos, has accepted the case and has already issued the first court orders. I'll read them to you verbatim. A preventive freeze is ordered on all bank accounts, credit cards, and financial assets in the name of Adrian Cole, as well as the precautionary impoundment of the vehicle, make Mercedes-Benz, E-Class, license plate 8372 BCD, registered in the name of Stephen Hayes, as a possible direct product of the crime under investigation. I felt a surge of satisfaction. The wheels of justice were beginning to turn. When will those orders be executed? They are already being executed. This very morning, court officers showed up at Stephen Hayes' residence in Los Angeles with the order to seize the Mercedes. According to the report I received an hour ago, Stephen tried to resist, claiming the vehicle was his legitimate property, but the officers proceeded according to the court order. The car is now in judicial impound as material evidence in the case. I couldn't help a small smile. Stephen Hayes, the arrogant man who flaunted his Mercedes on social media, had just lost his precious gift. And Adrian's accounts are completely frozen as of yesterday. He cannot make any transactions, no withdrawals, no payments. This includes automatic payments like his apartment mortgage or any other financial commitment he has. The bank, upon receiving the court notification, proceeded immediately. Monica pulled out another document. But there's more. We've received additional information from the bank that enormously strengthens our case. Remember, we mentioned that someone updated your email address in the bank records? Well, we requested the system logs and discovered that this change was made from Adrian's personal computer. We have the IP address, the exact date November 13th of last year, and the access data. Your son logged into your online banking using your credentials, which he probably obtained by watching you or through some spyware on your home computer. That explained a lot. I remembered that last October, Adrian had come to visit and had offered to help me update my computer because, according to him, it was very slow. He spent more than 2 hours manipulating my machine. He probably installed some program to capture my passwords. It's absolute premeditation, I said with bitterness. This wasn't an impulsive mistake. It was meticulously planned for weeks, maybe months. Exactly, and that considerably worsens his legal situation. We are not talking about a crime of passion or a moment of weakness. We are looking at a planned scam with malice aforethought, using technology to breach security systems, forgery of documents, identity theft, and receipt of illicit goods. D.A. Batista mentioned to me that he will seek penalties in the upper range of the legal spectrum due to these aggravating factors. Monica closed the folder and looked at me directly. Mr. Cole, I must ask you something important. Your son's defense, when they finally hire a lawyer, will try to use the family bond to appeal to your compassion. They will probably argue that he is a young man, that he has a promising future, that a conviction will ruin his life. They might even request that you appear as a character witness, speaking of his good qualities. Are you mentally prepared to stand firm? Completely, I replied, without hesitation. My son had multiple opportunities to confess, to ask for forgiveness, to make it right. Instead, he chose to lie to me for months while watching my credit get destroyed. There will be no compassion from me. Monica nodded in approval. Good, because what comes next will be emotionally difficult. Adrian will be formally summoned to testify next week. His testimony will be crucial. Then will come the preliminary hearings, where you will also have to testify. You will see your son in the courtroom. You will hear his defense arguments. You will witness how they try to minimize what he did. I'm prepared for all of it. There's something else you should know. We received information that Adrian lost his job yesterday. The logistics company where he worked has strict policies about criminal investigations involving their employees. When they found out about the judicial freeze on his accounts and the criminal complaint, they proceeded with his immediate dismissal, citing loss of confidence. I felt a pang of pain, despite everything. Seeing my son lose his job, his stability, his future, brought me no joy. Only a deep sadness for the waste of potential and for the catastrophic decisions that had led him to this point. And Nicole? Monica consulted her notes. According to information we obtained unofficially, Nicole Hayes filed for a preventive separation 3 days ago. Although they aren't technically married yet, she wants to make it legally clear that she has no financial ties to Adrian. The wedding scheduled for June is obviously cancelled. The Hayes family has completely cut ties with him. Ironic. Adrian had destroyed his life trying to impress a family that was now abandoning him in his most vulnerable moment. All the sacrifice, all the betrayal, all the fraud had been completely useless. The next step, Monica continued, is Adrian's formal statement before the investigating judge. He will have to answer under oath about every aspect of the fraud. How he obtained your documents, how he forged the signatures, who the imposter he hired was, what he did with the money, what role Stephen Hayes played. If he lies or contradicts himself, it will be used against him during the trial. How long do you estimate the entire process will take until the verdict? In cases like this, with so much documentary evidence, probably between 8 and 10 months from the complaint to the final sentence. We're in May now, so we'll possibly have a resolution early next year, 8 to 10 months. Almost a year of legal proceedings. It would be exhausting, painful, and would publicly expose my son's betrayal. But it was the price of justice. One last thing, said Monica. Chase Bank, after reviewing the entire judicial file and the evidence of fraud, has made the decision to completely remove the debt from your credit record. Furthermore, they are considering initiating their own legal actions against Adrian for the damage to their institutional reputation. You will be completely in the clear once the process concludes. Finally, a piece of good news in the midst of the chaos. I left Monica's office feeling that the pieces were falling into place. Justice was slow, but it was inevitable, and I was willing to wait as long as it took. The following months passed with the characteristic slowness of the American justice system. May gave way to June, then July, and finally August arrived with its suffocating heat. During all that time, the legal process advanced methodically, accumulating testimonies, additional evidence, and statements. Adrian's formal statement before Judge Campos was a pathetic spectacle. Monica kept me informed of every detail. My son initially tried to deny everything, claiming the signatures were authentic and that I had verbally authorized the loan. But when the judge showed him Javier Solis's expert report with the 14 points of divergence, when they presented him with the security footage showing the imposter, when they confronted him with the computer records of how he had manipulated my email, his defense completely crumbled. Finally, he confessed. He admitted to forging the signatures. He admitted to hiring an unemployed actor named Matthew Parks for $2,000 to pose as me at the bank. He admitted to using the money to buy the Mercedes destined for Stephen. The only thing he flatly denied was acting under duress, insisting it had all been his idea, trying to protect his former father-in-law from additional charges. But that loyalty was not reciprocated. Stephen Hayes, when summoned to testify in July, completely distanced himself from any responsibility. He hired one of the most expensive law firms in Los Angeles, and his defense was simple but effective. He had received a gift from his son-in-law without knowing the illicit origin of the money. The social media posts, his lawyer argued, were simply normal displays of gratitude. The conversations where he had set expectations about Adrian's commitment did not constitute legal coercion to commit crimes. However, D.A. Batista didn't give up. He presented the audio recording of the visit to my house, where Stephen offered a bribe to drop the charges, where he indirectly admitted to having set the demand for the significant gift, where his knowledge of the problematic origin of the money was implicit in his words and actions. In August, 3 months after filing the complaint, Adrian lost his apartment. With no income from his dismissal, no access to his frozen accounts, and no possibility of paying the mortgage, the bank foreclosed. My son was forced to move into a rented room in a marginal neighborhood of Los Angeles, sharing an apartment with 3 strangers. Rose begged me to help him, to at least let him come home temporarily. We fought bitterly for the first time in 30 years of marriage. She couldn't understand my inflexible stance. To her, Adrian was still her baby, her only son, deserving of compassion regardless of his crimes. To me, he was an adult who had made conscious decisions and now had to face the consequences. "I can't keep living like this, Bernie," Rose told me one August afternoon, suitcases in hand. "I'm going to my sister's house in Orlando for a while. I need space to think. I don't recognize the man you've become." I watched her leave with a broken heart, but without changing my position. Some battles cannot be won without collateral damage. In September, more devastating news arrived for Adrian. He found temporary work in a distribution warehouse, loading boxes for minimum wage. But when his employer ran the routine background check and discovered the pending criminal investigation for fraud, embezzlement, and forgery, he was fired after just 2 weeks. Monica informed me that Adrian was falling into a downward spiral. No stable job, no money, no family, no prospects. His public defender, a young recent graduate named Paul Serrano, with no experience in complex cases, tried to negotiate plea deals with the prosecutor, but the DA's office's stance was clear. They wanted an exemplary conviction. In October, 6 months after initiating the process, I received a summons to testify in the preliminary hearings for the trial. The day came, and I entered the courtroom with Monica by my side. It was an austere room, with dark wood panels, wooden benches for the public, and the elevated bench where the judge would sit. Adrian was there, sitting next to his lawyer at the defense table. He looked emaciated, at least 20 pounds lighter, with a neglected beard and a wrinkled, cheap suit that he had probably bought at some thrift store. Our eyes met for an instant. In his, I saw a silent plea, desperation. I looked away. Judge Campos presided over the hearing with serene authority. I was called to the stand as the main witness. I swore to tell the truth on the Bible, although I'm not particularly religious, and took my seat. D.A. Batista, a man in his 50s with round glasses and a powerful voice, conducted the examination. "Mr. Cole, can you describe for the court your relationship with the defendant, Adrian Cole?" "He is my son," I replied in a controlled voice. "My only son. Did you ever authorize him to apply for a bank loan in your name?" "Never." "Did you ever give him permission to use your identity documents for financial purposes?" "No. He told me he needed copies for vendor quotes for his wedding." It was a deliberate deception. At any point during the 5 months following the fraudulent loan application, did your son inform you of what he had done? "Never. Not once. I found out when the bank called me about the missed payments." The prosecutor continued for 40 minutes, extracting every painful detail of the betrayal. I described how Adrian had manipulated my email, how he had forged the signatures, how he had used the money to impress a family that eventually abandoned him. Then it was the defense attorney's turn. Paul Serrano stood up nervously. "Mr. Cole, is it true that you and your son had a close relationship before these events?" "I thought so." "And is it true that your son expressed on multiple occasions his intention to pay you back?" "After he was discovered, yes, but those promises are worthless when made under legal pressure." "Mr. Cole, don't you consider that a prison sentence would be excessively harsh for your son? Wouldn't you prefer a resolution that allows for rehabilitation instead of punishment?" I looked directly at Adrian before answering. My son had innumerable opportunities to confess voluntarily, to offer a sincere apology, to make amends before it reached this point. He chose silence and lies until the evidence cornered him. The justice system must run its course without interference from misguided paternal feelings. I saw Adrian hide his face in his hands. His lawyer asked no more questions. The hearing concluded after 3 hours. As we left the courthouse, several local journalists were waiting for us. The case had gained media attention due to its dramatic nature. Son betrays father to impress wealthy in-laws. Monica handled the questions professionally, while I remained silent. I had no interest in turning this into a public spectacle. That night, alone in my empty house without Rose, I reflected on everything that had happened. 8 months ago, I was a man with a seemingly happy family, a successful son, a promising future as a grandfather. Now, I was a man alone, with an absent wife, a criminal son facing prison, and a publicly tarnished reputation. But I was also a man who had defended his principles regardless of the personal cost. And that, amidst the pain and loneliness, gave me a certain peace. The final trial was held in January of the following year, exactly 8 months after filing the initial complaint. Winter had arrived in Miami with persistent rains that seemed to reflect the melancholy of the whole situation. The courtroom of Criminal Court Number 2 was packed. Family, journalists, onlookers, attracted by the media coverage the case had generated. I arrived early, accompanied by Monica. I wore my best suit, the same one I had worn to my sister's wedding years ago. I wanted to present myself with dignity, to show that despite everything, I maintained my composure. Adrian entered the room minutes later, handcuffed and escorted by 2 sheriff's deputies. They had revoked his bail 2 weeks earlier when he tried to sell some personal assets that were under judicial freeze. The judge considered him a flight risk or a risk of concealing assets. My son had spent the last 2 weeks in pre-trial detention. He looked broken. He had aged 10 years in these months. His face was gaunt, with deep dark circles that spoke of sleepless nights. The suit he wore was too big for him, evidence of drastic weight loss. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears, but I kept my gaze fixed forward. Stephen Hayes was also present, sitting in the public section with his own legal team. Although the main trial was against Adrian, Stephen faced separate charges of qualified receipt of stolen property that would be evaluated later. His expression was one of barely contained fury. He had already lost the Mercedes. He had spent over $50,000 in legal fees, and his business reputation was seriously damaged. The judge presiding over the court, Judge Beatrice Warren, a magistrate with a recognized track record in economic crime cases, opened the session by banging her gavel. The session for case number 4321-2024 is now open. The state versus Adrian Cole for the crimes of forgery of a public document, identity theft, aggravated fraud, and embezzlement, she announced with a firm voice. De Batista presented his case first. For 2 hours, he meticulously laid out all the evidence. The forensic handwriting report, the security footage, the bank records, the testimonies of bank employees, the digital evidence of computer manipulation, the photographs of the Mercedes, the social media posts. Each piece of the puzzle fit perfectly, building an irrefutable case. This was not a youthful mistake, nor an impulsive act, the prosecutor argued with passion. It was a meticulously planned fraud, executed with premeditation and malice aforethought, that destroyed a father's credit and trust in his only son. The defendant used technology to breach security systems, hired a professional imposter, forged official documents, and all of this driven by the vanity of impressing a family he considered superior. Society cannot tolerate this type of conduct without proportional consequences. Then it was the defense's turn. Paul Serrano, the young public defender, did what he could with a practically indefensible case. His strategy was to appeal to the court's emotional understanding. Your Honor, we do not deny the facts. My client made serious, unforgivable mistakes, but I ask the court to consider the context. Adrian Cole is a 32-year-old man who fell victim to psychological manipulation by Stephen Hayes, who used my client's emotional vulnerability and his need for acceptance to induce him to commit these acts. My client has lost everything: his job, his fiancée, his family, his future. He is destitute, facing severe depression. An effective prison sentence would completely destroy him without possibility of rehabilitation. The judge listened to both sides without showing emotion. Then she addressed Adrian directly. Mr. Cole, you have the right to make a final statement before this court delivers its sentence. Do you wish to exercise that right? Adrian stood up, trembling. His voice came out broken when he began to speak. Your Honor, I have no excuses for what I did. I betrayed my father, the person who gave me everything in life. I did it for stupid reasons, for vanity, for wanting to be someone I'm not. Every day I wake up with the weight of that betrayal. I have tried to commit suicide twice in pre-trial detention. I no longer have anything to live for except the possibility, the remote hope, that one day my father might be able to forgive me. He turned to me, tears streaming down his face. Dad, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I destroyed everything we built together, but I beg you, I implore you, to ask the court for mercy. Not for me, but for Mom, for the good years we had. Don't let me end my life in prison, please. The room fell into absolute silence. I felt all eyes on me. The judge was also watching me, waiting for a reaction. Monica discreetly placed her hand on my arm, a gesture of silent support. I stood up. I hadn't planned to speak, but I felt it was necessary. Your Honor, I request permission to address the court. The judge nodded. Granted, Mr. Cole. I walked until I was in front of the bench, looking directly at Judge Warren. For 8 months, I have reflected deeply on this situation. I have been pressured by my wife, by acquaintances, even by strangers on the street who recognize the case from the media, to show compassion, to drop the charges, to allow my son to avoid the consequences of his actions. I paused, choosing my words carefully. But that misguided compassion would be a betrayal of the very values I tried to instill in him for 32 years. My son did not make a youthful mistake. He is 32 years old, not 18. He meticulously planned for months how to rob me, how to destroy my credit, how to lie to me day after day while watching the consequences of his actions. He had innumerable opportunities to confess voluntarily and chose silence until the evidence cornered him. I turned to look directly at Adrian. If this court shows excessive clemency, if the consequences are less than what this crime deserves, we would be sending the message that family ties justify impunity, that you can betray the one who gave you life if you just cry hard enough afterward. That would be unjust not only to me, but to every victim of family fraud in this country. I turned my attention back to the judge. I respectfully request that this court apply justice without considering my parental relationship with the defendant, that the sentence be proportional to the gravity of the crimes committed, and that it serve as an example that no one, regardless of their family ties, is above the law. I sat back down. The silence in the room was deafening. Adrian was sobbing openly, his face hidden in his hands. His lawyer looked defeated. Judge Warren took notes for several minutes. Finally, she spoke. This court will recess to deliberate. The sentence will be delivered tomorrow at 10 a.m. This session is adjourned. I left the courthouse in the cold January rain. Journalists shouted questions that I completely ignored. Monica walked beside me in silence until we reached her car. "You did the right thing," she said finally. "I know it wasn't easy." "None of this has been easy," I replied, looking out the window as she drove, "but it was necessary." That night, I slept better than I had in months, with the certainty of having honored my principles to the very end. The next day, I returned to the courthouse to hear the sentence. The room was packed again, perhaps with even more people than the day before. The anticipation was palpable. Adrian was brought from detention, looking just as broken as he had 24 hours earlier. Judge Warren entered the room at exactly 10 a.m. We all stood. When she took her seat, the silence was absolute. The only sound was the rain lashing against the courthouse windows. The session for Case 4321, 2024, is resumed. She announced solemnly, "This court has deliberated exhaustively, considering all the evidence presented, the testimonies gathered, and the arguments from both sides." She paused as she organized her papers. The proven facts are as follows. The defendant, Adrian Cole, in a premeditated manner and with full awareness of his actions, forged the signature of his father, Bernard Cole, on multiple banking documents. He hired a third party, citizen Matthew Parks, to impersonate his father before the banking institution. He manipulated computer systems to intercept bank communications. He fraudulently obtained $200,000 through a loan he never intended, nor had the capacity to repay. He used $185,000 of that money to acquire a luxury vehicle intended for a third party, $12,000 for personal events, and $3,000 in cash for unexplained purposes. The judge looked directly at Adrian. These facts constitute the crimes of forgery of a public document, aggravated identity theft through the use of technology, aggravated fraud due to the amount and the family relationship, and embezzlement. The state penal code establishes penalties of 2 to 6 years in prison for these crimes, with aggravators for premeditation, use of technology, and abuse of family trust. My breathing quickened. This was the definitive moment. However, this court must also consider mitigating factors. The defendant has no prior criminal record. He has shown genuine remorse, albeit late. He has ultimately cooperated with the justice system by confessing to the facts, and his current situation of destitution and social exclusion already constitutes a significant form of punishment. I felt a knot in my stomach. Was she going to be too lenient? For all these reasons, this court sentences Adrian Cole to 3 years in prison for the crimes of forgery, identity theft, aggravated fraud, and embezzlement. Of these 3 years, 2 are conditionally suspended for a supervisory period of 5 years. This means the defendant will serve 1 year of effective prison time, and the remaining 2 years will be suspended as long as he commits no new crimes during the next 5 years. Adrian collapsed into his chair. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder, trying to console him. Furthermore, the judge continued, the defendant is ordered to restitute the entirety of the $200,000 to Mr. Bernard Cole, plus accrued legal interest, calculated at approximately $18,000 additional. The restitution period will be 10 years through monthly payments once the convict regains work capacity after serving his sentence. The judge turned toward the section where Stephen Hayes was sitting. As for Mr. Stephen Hayes, this court considers it proven that he knowingly received goods produced from criminal activity. He is convicted of qualified receipt of stolen property and sentenced to 2 years in prison, a sentence that is also conditionally suspended for 5 years. Furthermore, he is held jointly liable with Mr. Adrian Cole for the restitution of the full value of the Mercedes-Benz, appraised at $185,000, which will be judicially auctioned, and its proceeds will be used to compensate Mr. Bernard Cole. Stephen Hayes stood up furiously. This is an outrage. I received a legitimate gift. I will appeal this all the way to the Supreme Court. The judge banged her gavel hard. Mr. Hayes, control your emotions or you will be removed from the court. You have the right to appeal by following the corresponding legal procedures. Stephen sat back down, his face red with rage. Finally, Judge Warren concluded, Mr. Bernard Cole's credit history will be completely cleared of any reference to this fraudulent loan. Chase Bank has been notified to remove all negative information associated with this situation. It is so decreed and ordered. She banged her gavel one last time. This session is adjourned. I left the courthouse with mixed feelings. On one hand, satisfaction that justice had been served. On the other, the reality that my son would spend a year in prison weighed on my conscience. But it had been his choice, not mine. Monica caught up with me at the exit. It's a fair sentence, she said. It could have been worse for him. 1 year effective with 2 suspended is relatively lenient, considering the gravity of the crimes. I know, I replied. Now comes the hard part. In the following weeks, I made decisions that would permanently change my life. Rose never returned from her sister's house. She sent me separation papers in February. I didn't contest them or sign them. I simply put them in a drawer. Our relationship was over, in fact, even if we were legally still married. In March, I sold the family home. It was too big, too full of painful memories. Every room reminded me of moments that now seemed like lies. Birthdays celebrated, late-night conversations, hugs I believed were genuine. I got $320,000 for the property. With that money, I bought a small but bright apartment in San Diego, facing the sea. A 650-square-foot place with a large terrace where I could watch the sunrise over the Pacific. I moved in April, taking only the essentials: my clothes, some books, photographs of my deceased parents, no photos of Adrian, no memories of the years we shared. I changed my phone number, closed my old email account, and blocked Adrian on every possible platform. I didn't want to know anything about his life in prison, about his letters asking for forgiveness about his attempts to contact me. That chapter was permanently closed. Rose wrote to me once in May, begging me to visit Adrian in prison at least once. "He's still your son," her letter said. I tore it up without finishing it. I established a new routine in San Diego. Morning walks on the beach, coffee at the same seaside cafe every morning, painting classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, a book club on Saturdays. I met new people who knew nothing about my past, about my criminal son, about the betrayal that had destroyed my family. To them, I was simply Bernie, a retired engineer, enjoying his retirement by the sea. A year passed. Adrian completed his effective prison sentence and got out in January of the following year. I found out not because he contacted me, but because Monica informed me as part of the legal follow-up on the case. Adrian now lived in a shared apartment on the outskirts of Los Angeles, working in a logistics warehouse, earning minimum wage. Every month, he religiously paid $1,800 as part of his court-ordered restitution, $500 for the principal debt and $300 for interest. At that rate, it would take him approximately 12 years to fully pay back the $218,000 he owed me. He would be paying until he was 44, half his life destroyed by decisions made in a moment of stupid vanity. Stephen Hayes appealed his sentence as he had threatened. He lost on appeal. He lost his hardware store business when his partners discovered the conviction for receiving stolen property. His family disintegrated when his wife filed for divorce. The last I heard of him, he was working as a salesman in a hardware store that he used to own, earning a fraction of what he used to make. As for me, I found an unexpected peace in my new life. It wasn't the life I had imagined for my retirement years. I didn't have grandchildren playing on my terrace. I didn't have a wife.